you for attending my session. As Diane just said, it's on advocating for quality metadata, shelf-ready MARC records, and the Joint Consortia Framework Agreement. As we heard in the previous session, Gavin and Jenny are working with SUPC to bring together metadata and procurement expertise to create value for institutions by positioning metadata as a cornerstone of the procurement process. In my session, I'll be talking about a related project that began in the spring of 2019 and was initiated by the National Acquisitions Group. If you're unfamiliar with the National Acquisitions Group, or NAG, they're a professional organisation for people responsible or interested in the acquisition, management and development of library resources in libraries of all types. NAG works with librarians, information officers, publishers, booksellers and service suppliers to promote supply chain efficiency and streamline acquisitions workflows, and this includes the supply of bibliographical data. So in the spring of 2019, the Joint Consortia Framework Agreement for the supply of books, ebooks, standing orders and related materials was extended until the 31st of July 2021. It was at this point that the NAG Executive Committee saw the opportunity to consult with higher education institution libraries in the UK and Ireland about their experiences with the framework and with shelf-ready services, in particular the quality of shelf-ready metadata being supplied for books purchased from framework suppliers. The aim was to reach out to cataloguers to gather their input for a review of the standards for shelf-ready records specified in the framework agreement. It was at this point that I volunteered to work on the project and was co-opted as a member of the NAG Executive Committee. So coming from a cataloguing background, I have not previously had much experience with the nitty-gritty or dark arts of procurement or negotiating purchasing agreements with suppliers. So when I began to work on this project, I wanted to fully understand the existing terms of the agreement, specifically those related to shelf-ready metadata. As Jenny detailed in the previous presentation, the agreement terms only include mandatory shelf-ready metadata specifications for Lot 1 of the agreement, English language print books. This indicates that there is potential for inconsistencies in the level of service for shelf-ready metadata across the different types of material being supplied via the framework. As Jenny also explained, the agreement terms state that each library is responsible for specifying its MARC record requirements to their selected suppliers. So shelf-ready metadata specifications are to be agreed on an individual basis rather than via a set of recognised standards. Appendix B of the Framework Agreement contains a document with further requirements related to the supply of shelf-ready ebooks and e-textbooks. And this includes some details about MARC record specifications. That the information in this Schedule 1 about required MARC fields is in definite need of revision, as they're out of date for current cataloguing standards. For example, MARC field 440 is listed for use for a series statement, and any MARC 21 nerds out there will know that this field became obsolete in 2008. So, having assessed the current terms for shelf-ready metadata supply in the agreement, I started to contact the community via mailing lists and consortia groups to ask cataloguers and metadata specialists about their experiences with shelf-ready metadata. Informal discussions produced some lively exchanges, and I was sent many examples of cataloguing errors and issues that have been found in shelf-ready records. Here are just a few of the comments that I received. The overwhelming message in all of this feedback was that cataloguers would really like suppliers to take their concerns about the negative impact of poor quality shelf-ready metadata seriously. There was also a strong indication that libraries were in support of including clearer recommendations for shelf-ready metadata in the framework agreement terms, so that libraries would no longer have to do this negotiation on an individual basis. So all of this information provided a lot of qualitative evidence that libraries would like to see improvements in the quality of shelf-ready records. But I also wanted to gather some quantitative data about shelf-ready metadata quality. So with the input of some metadata specialists in the community of practice, including members of the Wealth Metadata and Quality Group, Metadata and Cataloguing Group, I designed and ran the Quality of Shelf-Ready Metadata survey. The survey was open for responses in January of this year and ran for just over a month. The full survey report is available on the NAG website, and all the statistics and charts I've included in this presentation are taken from the full report. The survey received responses from 50 higher education institution libraries across the UK and Ireland, providing data from the members of all the regional purchasing consortia that are currently accessing the framework agreement. I'd like to thank anyone here who took the time to complete the survey on behalf of their library. The initial questions in the survey focused on gathering data about the proportion of respondents receiving shelf-ready metadata from suppliers for the 3 book formats available in the framework agreement. While 70% of survey respondents indicated they received shelf-ready records for print books and 90% indicated that they received them for ebooks, only 14% indicated that they received shelf-ready records for e-textbooks. As you can see from the Venn diagram, a large proportion of respondents are receiving shelf-ready records for more than one format, with 54% receiving records for both print books and ebooks. This rises to 64% if those who are receiving records for all 3 formats are included. The survey gathered data about which suppliers libraries are receiving shelf-ready records from. The most commonly selected, or the biggest framework suppliers, can be seen in this chart. Of course, this data was gathered before the UK and Ireland felt the full impact of the COVID-19 crisis, so there have been subsequent changes to which suppliers are available for selection by libraries, as well as to the amount of shelf-ready materials that are being ordered. It's important to point out as well that the survey data revealed a trend for libraries to use multiple suppliers for shelf-ready services. 57% of respondents indicate that they received shelf-ready records for print books from 2 or more suppliers. This rises to 80% for shelf-ready records for ebooks. It's sensible to assume that this trend will continue, as supplier selection is often linked to title availability, pricing, and differing license models. As previously mentioned, the current framework agreement terms state that requirements for shelf-ready MARC records should be specified by the individual library. Survey responses indicated that 74% of libraries have communicated or negotiated with 1 or more framework supplier about their metadata specifications, with the most commonly used or the biggest suppliers showing the highest level of reported engagement. The survey included questions about the frequency of quality control and error correction activities. A total of 88% of respondent libraries indicated that they perform quality control or spot checking on shelf-ready records, 60% checking individual records. 96% of libraries indicated that they're carrying out in-house error correction on shelf-ready records, with 62% saying they always perform error correction tasks on records received from framework suppliers. When asked whether they report these errors back to the suppliers, 82% of respondents said that they did, with 60% indicating that they do this occasionally and 14% frequently. The main reason given for not being able to check, correct, or report back errors in shelf-ready records was a lack of available staff time and the high volume of shelf-ready records being received. Respondents also voiced some frustration about the difficulties they'd experienced in reporting errors back and in receiving replacement records from suppliers in a timely manner. So what are all the errors that libraries have been experiencing? In order to gather the data about this, the survey provided respondents with a list of 20 possible metadata issues in MARC fields and in a multiple choice matrix. Respondents were asked to select which issues they most commonly encounter across print and electronic formats. The most commonly encountered issue, selected by 72% of respondents across print and ebook formats, was incomplete or brief records with missing MARC fields. The joint second most commonly encountered issues for ebooks were data recorded incorrectly in MARC fields and missing subject headings, indicated by almost half of respondents. And the second most commonly encountered issue with print book records, selected by almost a third of respondents, was incorrect or inaccurate data in MARC fields. A significant number of respondents also indicated they had commonly encountered issues with missing access points or a lack of authority control across name, title, and subject headings. In addition to the 20 issues provided, respondents also stated that they'd encountered the following errors: records missing a title field, records containing non-standard terminology, and records with incorrect or inconsistent ISBNs. This quantitative data demonstrates the diverse range of issues and errors that libraries have been experiencing. The majority of these issues fall into 2 categories: inaccurately or incorrectly recorded metadata elements and missing metadata elements. When asked about their shelf-ready metadata preferences going forward, 94% of respondents agreed or strongly agreed that it would save them time and effort and improve the discovery experience for their library's users if shelf-ready records supplied via the framework met an agreed quality standard. 96% of respondents also agreed or strongly agreed that their library would like shelf-ready MARC records to be catalogued to RDA standards. 82% agreed or strongly agreed that their library would prefer to be supplied with full and accurate records rather than brief records, as these do not provide a full level of discoverability. These responses demonstrate that the majority of libraries have a preference for both full and accurate shelf-ready records, and there is customer demand for shelf-ready records to contain quality descriptive bibliographic metadata, where quality means both detail and accuracy. So what do we mean by a quality metadata record? Survey respondents were asked to select which MARC fields that their library considers to be essential to their shelf-ready record requirements for print books and for ebooks. The majority of respondents consider these 12 accurately recorded, descriptive and authority-controlled elements to be essential. These elements cover 5 distinct categories of metadata: titles, names, dates, book identifiers, and subjects, plus additional attributes related to format, uniform resource identifiers and access information, and order-specific information. The same 5 categories of metadata have subsequently been identified by the National Information Standards Organization in their recent document outlining ebook bibliographic metadata requirements in the sale, publication, discovery, delivery, and preservation supply chain. If you were present for Duncan Chalmers' presentation yesterday on validating bibliographic data, these metadata elements for ebooks will be familiar. NISO's paper articulates the fact that these elements are essential for all metadata stakeholders across all schemas, not just libraries and not just MARC records. In addition to the essential elements in the 5 categories listed, survey respondents also indicated that shelf-ready metadata records should, wherever possible, include these 5 desirable metadata elements. The majority of these are recorded in note fields in the MARC record and add extra descriptive detail about the book, ebook or e-textbook, and assist the user with resource identification and selection. They're particularly useful if the library's discovery layer can index this data for keyword searching. Finally, respondents indicated that there's also a need to ensure that library-specific or custom metadata is accurately supplied, for example, any bespoke class marks or call numbers that the individual library may require. One of the big themes that emerged from the survey data was a need for both accuracy and detail in shelf-ready metadata, with the following quotation summing up many of the respondents' comments. "We do not require perfection. We need records that serve the various purposes we use them for, including discovery and identification of works. We also need records that are as future-proof as possible and help us to be ready for linked data, not just give the nod to RDA requirements." Further themes highlighted by respondents were a consensus that clear agreed standards for functional shelf-ready records should be part of the framework agreement, and that libraries are looking for shelf-ready services to deliver real workflow efficiencies and therefore value for money for their organisation. In summary, the NAG Quality of Shelf-Ready Metadata Survey has revealed that libraries from across the various purchasing consortia are in agreement that a consistent approach to shelf-ready record specifications will be to the benefit of all framework stakeholders, as it would assist with ensuring the reliability and interoperability of bibliographic metadata and reduce the need for checking, correction, or enrichment tasks. To that end, the NAG survey report recommends that shelf-ready records supplied via the framework should include the 12 essential metadata elements identified by the NAG survey report, and wherever possible, the 5 desirable metadata elements as well. There should also be provision for libraries to specify any custom metadata elements for inclusion, such as bespoke class marks or call numbers and electronic order information. Finally, the metadata elements recorded in the shelf-ready records should follow RDA and MARC 21 standards and contain consistent and accurately recorded data, both in terms of what information is recorded and how it is formatted. So what does this look like in practice? Here are the example MARC records from the survey report, which can be used as a guide or template for the creation of shelf-ready records for print books, e-books, and e-textbooks. I appreciate that the records may appear a little small here in the screenshots, so do feel free to look at them in more detail in the full report on the NAG website. Hopefully you can see that the example records have been devised following full RDA standards in the MARC 21 format and are colour-coded to identify the essential, desirable and custom metadata elements. Among the blue-coloured desirable elements are URIs for authority-controlled headings. As Jenny mentioned previously, this is just a small step in the direction towards linked data, and we hope to encourage framework suppliers to include these elements in shelf-ready records. So what's next? Since publishing the survey report, I've been working with NAG and Jenny and Gavin and SUPC to encourage framework suppliers to join the conversation and engage with us about metadata quality. We held an engagement webinar in August and invited current and prospective framework suppliers to comment on the survey report and recommendations. We also had a small virtual meeting with one of the big suppliers to discuss in more detail how they might adapt or modify their model of metadata supply and how any additional costs might be met. These discussions do present metadata and procurement professionals with a challenge, because whilst we do have clear evidence to demonstrate that library requirements are not being met at the moment when it comes to shelf-ready metadata services, we cannot expect nor demand rapid universal adoption of the report's recommendations, particularly where there are financial considerations. The metadata supply chain is highly complex, with many stakeholders that use metadata in different formats and schemas, not just MARC 21, and for a variety of purposes. In such a diverse marketplace, it's important that libraries give a clear and consistent message to suppliers about their metadata requirements, but also that all actors in the supply chain work together on improving metadata quality, as this will be to the benefit of all the stakeholders. NAG will continue to work with SUPC to engage with framework suppliers and also with the Plan M project to encourage collaborative solutions that can be implemented in a realistic manner. As Gavin mentioned earlier, we do not want to exclude suppliers from participation in the framework agreement if they cannot yet meet these shelf-ready metadata specifications, but we do want to encourage supplier adoption of these recommendations. There may well be merit in exploring something like a metadata gold standard that could be awarded to suppliers who do meet the specifications, and this would be mutually beneficial to libraries and suppliers, as those who do align their metadata provision with the recommendations will be able to advertise this to libraries, which will give libraries peace of mind and also could potentially attract more business from the sector. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Emma. That was a great talk. Really useful to get this kind of data to kind of support things. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, I have one, and this may not have been answered directly by your survey, but one thing that, because you're saying that they should be RDA compliant as much as possible, is the requirements anyway. So how do we make sure that we're balancing the records that we're getting with not only making sure that we're covering RDA standards and the core elements and so on, as well as anything above and beyond that we can get, as well as any sort of maybe local policies that we have at our libraries that might be a bit different or a bit additional from the standard record that we get.
Yeah, so I appreciate that implementing RDA in MARC 21 isn't really fully possible because of the limitations of MARC 21 as a format.
Yeah.
But hopefully the example records within the recommendations and within the report sort of illustrate how far we can go to implement RDA in the MARC 21 format, certainly in terms of including specific fields and the way that the data is recorded in those fields. You're right that some libraries do have their own internal cataloguing policies and practices, which may differ from the templates from those examples, but I would encourage perhaps those libraries maybe look at the templates and think about why are they doing things differently to those templates. Not saying that they are perfect, because there's no such thing as perfect metadata, but it might be that this is a further conversation that needs to be taken forward through Plan M or through things like like this through MDG to talk about what do we mean by metadata quality. And I know that JISC are looking at this as well in the development of Library Hub services. They're looking at creating some sort of tool that will measure quality of MARC records. So I think there is provision to have kind of bespoke elements in your data, but on the whole, I think we should be looking at consistency of quality because that helps with record sharing and matching.
I agree entirely. It's just that unfortunately there are just things that happen that don't allow for that or haven't been done previously, but I think we should be consistent as possible. That's my personal view, but I know it's not always possible. We have a question from Jenny. Historic problem used to be that the low quality of record that was available at acquisition stage held precedence over subsequent better records that might still be available. How much is that still a problem in the LMS?
So this did come up in the survey data that when a ebook or book is purchased, they might initially get a brief record, and then there either isn't a mechanism at all, or the mechanism doesn't always work fully for them to receive a full record. And I recognise that for some suppliers, this is not their fault necessarily. It's down to the publisher not supplying the metadata in a timely manner. So really, I think that aside from what we talk about in terms of metadata quality, we are also looking at metadata supply, you know, the mechanisms we use. And Gavin mentioned sort of use of APIs and that kind of thing. Not all libraries can take advantage of that, depends on their systems really. So it's going to be part of the wider discussions about how we talk about shelf-ready services as a whole, really.
Right. And Jane sort of has I guess a suggestion. We could also work with the publishers organization, BIC, who already provide accreditation and awards for business efficiency for publishers and libraries, to add metadata into the mix. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So I really, kind of as Gavin and Jenny were saying before, we are kind of just starting things off. So we want this conversation to be open with all stakeholders, including people like BIC. It would be really good to get them on board. Particularly if we want to do something like a metadata gold standard or some other kind of signifier to demonstrate that the supplier is going to give you MARC records that you don't need to spend hours checking and correcting and doing this work on. So it's definitely something we could work together on.
And Sarah would like to know how we can access the templates, if that's possible.
So they are in the full report. The report's available on the NAG website as a PDF that you can download. I guess if people want to have them supplied in MARC format as a MARC record, we may be able to do that. Obviously, the ones that are the examples are for specific ebooks, a specific ebook and a specific print book. So they may not be perfect for your uses. I don't think, for example, that the example records are for a book in a series, for example. So I don't think there's a series field. So they are just examples. So really, it's that list of 12 essential metadata elements and 5 desirable elements expressed in the MARC 21 format that we are looking at in terms of creating shelf-ready metadata going forward.
Right. So just to wait to see if there's any last questions coming in, I just wanted to remind everyone of kind of the structure of the rest of the day. And sorry, my dog just decided to start barking. I guess my dog would like to take over chairing for me for the morning, which is completely fine. So I would just like to say is that we have a breakout session starting here now in just a minute. So I will randomly assign people into rooms. What we'll try to do is get the 3 different speakers from this morning spread out as much as possible so that you can all have a chance to chat with them. Then we will have a break until 2 o'clock. And when we're back at 2, myself and Jane Daniels will be presenting the work that we've been doing in the Cataloging Ethics Committee in combination with people from American Library Association and from Canada on the Code of Ethics for Catalogers that we've been working on for the last 1.5 years or so. So we'll give an update on where that is, and we'll ask for some feedback and some discussion in a breakout session that follows that. and that will be, then we will have the AGM at 3:20, which you would have had to register for separately. That's a separate link that came to you. And if you're still around this evening, it's quiz night at 7 o'clock. Unfortunately, we're virtual, so you'll have to bring your own pint, but hopefully you'll still be around to join us for some fun this evening. And with that, I don't see any final questions. So at this point, I'm just going to